lake, and he hadn't spent much time there. And it's just really interesting to watch the levels change of the water and to see what you can find when the water recedes. So.
When does it recede? Like, since it's a lake, is it just sort of like what time, when, I mean, like, can you describe that? Like, sort of what it's...
I think with the snow melt, it probably has a lot to do with it, but I don't know the scientific answer for that, because there are some years where the lake is just significantly lower, and years when it's significantly higher. I think it's just constantly lower than it was when, say, my dad was my age.
I was going to research his name, and I didn't do it before this interview today, which I'll sort of post it on visually, I guess. But there's a sculptor who had made, if I remember right, that's
the spiral jetty. Yeah.
What do you know what that artist's name is?
I don't remember.
Have you seen that though? That's something I've always wanted to kind of.
I don't think I've ever gone out there. I might have when I was quite little on like a field trip, but I don't know that I've ever gone out there.
Do you feel like Salt Lake City is a really... could you describe sort of the arts community that's in Salt Lake City a bit? Or, like, if and maybe just describe some of the different artists that you've met or your experience kind of working and living in Salt Lake City?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a big question.
It's a huge question.
It's a big community. But I've had good luck, I think, with the people that I've met in Salt Lake. The artist community... for me, was almost entirely writer-based. When I was in my first few years of college, I had discovered this really fantastic group of writers who kind of launched me, for better or worse, on the path that I'm on now, almost as a reaction to them, but that's a longer story. And then there's this great street in Salt Lake City that I'm in love with. It's 3rd South, and most of the businesses along this stretch of 3rd South are owned by people around the age of 30. And there's No Brow Coffee, which is just a great coffee place that does art shows and showings, and they host local books. And then there's Frosty Darling, which has great handmade toys and clothes and knickknacks and art. And there's just a whole row of shops that I really like around that area. I have a lot of friends who are painters and writers, and I think there's a lot of difference in Salt Lake between those who do it and then those who do it and show it off. So there's a lot of people that I know who are maybe the best painter that I've ever met, but most people don't know they even paint.
Because they don't organize shows of their work.
Mm-hmm.
I guess I'm curious too about this, like, migration. It's a big move to come from Salt Lake City to come to Lawrence, or I would imagine it would be a big move. Can you describe sort of the difference I guess I'm asking, is there a difference in sort of the way that you've been working, like, since you've moved to Lawrence, and the way that you worked when you were in Salt Lake?
Yeah, I think there is, and I think it might have a lot to do with the fact that I'm less familiar with Lawrence, and also the fact that I'm now in school again and having to balance so much. So when I moved to Lawrence, I immediately set up a writing time, which I never did in Salt Lake. In Salt Lake, I would just sort of feel like it, and that's when I would work. And now that I live in Lawrence, Kansas, I have established that I have set writing days and times that I sacrifice for nothing, not even paper grading or any of the things that I probably should be doing.
No, I've never done that. I think you're doing the right thing. Like, what time of day is that time for you? Morning?
Yeah.
Me too. It's been the longest time since I've met somebody else who has that morning kind of time. My wife thinks I'm crazy. But yeah, I think that's a really good time. And you said specific days, is that based around your school schedule here?
Yeah, it has been. And now I've kind of learned for the next semester I'm going to try to base my school schedule more around my writing time, so everything's bumped later, and we'll see if that kills my social life as well as increases my writing time. We'll see.
I have sort of, I guess, switching gears just a little bit. I have some of my questions we kind of just touched on anyways, which is great. But I have kind of an anthropology
Okay.
question. Is that all right?
Yeah,
I just thought, you know,
See what I
because
can
in the sort of the writer's description note from your book, it mentioned that you had studied anthropology and you'd studied English at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
I just think, just sort of as a field of inquiry, like, or a method or an area of study, I guess, anthropology is really fascinating. So I came up with this question for you today. I don't know, like one of the reasons I like anthropology is because it's the study of sort of human culture, but also behavior and biology, and how those things sort of change through time. And after I read through your book, it seemed to me that as sort of a collection of poems, like that particular book seemed to be investigating like some of those same things. And so I was just curious. Do you feel like when you're writing poems and you're writing fiction, do you feel that you're doing some kind of research as you're doing that process? And I mean, and if you do, I mean, that might not be applicable to the way that you work, but if you do feel that way, maybe could you talk about maybe what you feel like you're researching when you do that? Or I guess first of all, is it some kind of research for you? Or?
I think that's an interesting question. I think at times there's a literal research aspect to the poetry writing where that comes from the anthropology background. There's a lot in anthropology where I felt I could have gone on to graduate study in certain aspects of anthropology, and since I didn't, I'm compensating by writing poems about or stories about what I was interested in. So I'm researching these anthropological topics and ideas and reading articles that aren't literature to turn it into creative work. So I am literally researching it. And then the poetry and the creative work, I think, is its own form of research, even if it has nothing to do with something that I've looked up. I went to an event at Wonder Fair, the King Cat comic event, and I don't remember his last name, John, who does the comics, said that his comics were sort of an investigation into the mundane moments of the daily life. And I think that when you can pull back from your writing enough, you will find what you're most interested in and what you've been researching without knowing that you were looking at it. I haven't found out what it is that I'm writing towards or against or around yet, but I think that that's probably what people who write on the back of your books are for, to tell you what it was that you were interested in.
Right, and I love research too. I just think it's I mean I'm sort of in a similar vein. Like I'm definitely someone who likes to research, and I've even met other writers here in Lawrence, like in sort of the cave-like basement of the Kansas University Library. One of the first times I met Elliot Stevens, like we were both in like this dusty, like room, and I was like, "Who's that guy?" Here I am researching. So can you tell us, like, what are some of the things that you've been fascinated with lately that you're researching, if you don't mind?
Well, I have kind of always been really morbid growing up. I have always just had a bizarre fascination with death and bizarre death and anything around death that's touching it at all. And so in anthropology, my main fascination by the end of it became focused around death rituals and like mummification and things like that. So a lot of my research has been solely on mummification and death rituals, and anytime I walk into like the dusty bookshelf down on Mass, I search first for mummy books, and then I look at the poetry section. I've also, before I moved to Kansas, started developing this weird fascination with Amelia Earhart. I was her for Halloween in 3rd grade, so I know it's been coming for a long time. But so I have seen every documentary that made about her.
What's the best documentary, do you think, that you've seen about?
Well, not to get really nerdy about this, but the interesting thing is there's not a lot of material out there about Amelia Earhart. So even though I've seen about 5 to 7 documentaries on her, they're pretty much the same documentary over and over again. So I would say probably go with the History Channel or PBS. Okay. But you're not going to get much more new information.
No, and her family home is here, right? In Kansas.
In Atchison.
Have you visited it?
I haven't yet.
Oh, I think that would be
That's
exciting.
Really high on my priority list. I'm waiting for better weather, though.
Yeah, that's probably a good idea.